Grazie a tutti, grazie ai ragazzi del liceo musicale che hanno eseguito brillantemente e introdotto in questo modo lieto il convegno di oggi. Ringrazio tutte le scuole che fanno parte del consorzio, che oggi sono qui rappresentate con loro studenti, con docenti, con referenti, alcuni qui presenti in aula, nella nostra aula magna, altri vedo collegati da remoto. Quindi ringrazio perché un consorzio, quale il nostro, consorzio Erasmus Mediazione per l'accoglienza, si basa proprio su una cooperazione di tutte le scuole, che sono scuole del primo e del secondo ciclo. Un ringraziamento alla professoressa Vacchelli, nostra persona di contatto per l'Agenzia Nazionale Erasmus e valente organizzatrice. Grazie mille. Dovrei also l'applauso e vi ringrazio. La giornata di oggi è una giornata appunto intensa con l'intervento di cui siamo onorati del professor Grammenos Mastrojeni, che poi verrà dettagliatamente presentato dalla professoressa Vacchelli, un intervento in linea con gli obiettivi del nostro consorzio e in linea con gli obiettivi dell'Agenda 2030 dell'Unione Europea. E sarà sicuramente molto molto formativo poter ascoltare le sue parole. L'altro punto importante della giornata è l'attività di disseminazione delle mobilità Erasmus che abbiamo condotto e che stiamo conducendo. Abbiamo qui presenti oggi degli studenti dalla Germania, perché una delle mobilità si è svolta per il nostro consorzio in Germania, Erasmus, già nei mesi scorsi, a dicembre. Altre sono proprio appena svolte in Spagna e in Francia, e quindi avremo modo di dare la parola ai ragazzi perché rendano noto e diffondano effettivamente il senso delle mobilità per l'apprendimento. Quindi è un apprendimento certamente linguistico, sia per la lingua del paese, che può essere lo spagnolo, la Germania, quindi il tedesco, il francese, sia nell'utilizzo di lingua veicolare che è l'inglese. Quindi apprendimento linguistico, possibilità di perfezionare e potenziare le competenze linguistiche e apprendimento di cittadinanza europea. Siamo tutti cittadini del nostro paese, naturalmente, ma cittadini europei. È anche l'occasione per fare conoscenze, amicizie, conoscere la cultura dei paesi che andiamo volta per volta visitando. È un'organizzazione articolata che ci riempie però di enorme soddisfazione nel momento in cui sentiamo e vediamo volti soddisfatti o il momento dei saluti con le famiglie ospitanti come momento toccante. E quindi crediamo che questo sia un modo per seminare oggi il futuro e le competenze di questa nostra generazione per il loro domani, anche nel mondo del lavoro o dell'istruzione oltre quella secondaria che adesso state svolgendo. Quindi non prendo altro tempo, credo che dovremmo riorganizzare dal punto di vista logistico e ripresentare il tavolo, magari ci facciamo supportare, e lascio quindi la parola alla professoressa Vacchelli. Grazie nuovamente a tutti per la presenza e la partecipazione odierna.
So, vielen Dank, unsere Schulleiterin. Das ist der Grund, woraus ich spreche auf Deutsch. Also unsere Gäste aus Hermersburg sind herzlich willkommen, sind am Sonntag eingetroffen, und das ist der Grund, das sage ich auch den Leuten, die von ferne uns zuhören, da sind. I give you word, Grammenos. I think you can, yes, use microphone without table and so on. And I invite you to come here, and I say a few words about Grammenos. I met him in Palermo last year at the, yes.
I'll do it.
Forum di Etica Civile was the name in Italian. So, civil ethic. What does it mean? It has to do with global citizenship, with responsibility, with consciousness. I met him. He was near me, and I was so honored to meet a man who is so important for the global citizenship, for the studies and relationship about climate change, for his role as vice.
Senior Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean. So long.
Yes, a very long title. His last book, Vola Italia, is an expression of his engagement. And the conference of today, Butterfly Effects, is an invitation to be active and to do something against climate change, concretely do something. Butterfly effects, how your happiness can save the planet. I find it a wonderful title, very stimulating, very motivating, and I think we all see you and watch, listen to you with great motivation and happiness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I am sure you're not interested in my personal life. I'm not a rock star and I'm not a football player. But still there is some kind of alchemy in here, which is strange. All things that seem unrelated come together. They come together for my life. My first job was a musician. I was playing the most boring instrument in the history of music, which is the lute. And then mediation. Actually, I'm going to talk to you about the environment, but I'm not a biologist, I'm not an ecologist, I am a lawyer. And I started mediating conflicts. One day, I mediated a conflict between a Yanomami tribe in the Amazonian forest and the mining company. And that's where I realized that the real driver of conflicts is how we relate to planet Earth, how we use its resources, and that's how I got into No, thank you. I'm going to stand. But another thing which is particular about this morning is that you could think that we had some time, so we've put three things that have got nothing to do one with the other together: music, environment, and dissemination of the rights. But actually, again, I don't know if it was thought, but it's a very wise alchemy. Music. Nature can be interpreted, understood through mathematics. And a famous guy called Leibniz defined music as an unconscious calculation. Music is the way in which you can perceive with your senses the beauty of mathematics, which is the same beauty of creation, which was also understood by our Greek philosophers who talked about the harmony of the spheres, things like that. And what has all this got to do with Erasmus programs and classes going in other countries? Well, the only one conclusion that we can get when you observe Mother Earth is that it belongs to everyone and that we have to work together. The idea of having a German nature and an Italian nature, and that they are opposite because they're just sources of income and money, is totally stupid. If we want to save our planet, we have to meet, join hands, and work together for this. Anyway, climate change, you've heard about it, and it's a big problem. So our instinct is to say that it should be solved by the big guys, the United Nations, the presidents, the ministers. Now, let's take a step back. What can the United Nations, the ministers do? They can do international treaties, they can make laws, They can impose taxes. And what are those? They are pieces of paper. Nature does not react to pieces of paper. Society does not react to pieces of paper. They only become important if they are a way to make it easier to change behavior for the only people who can make things change. And who are the only people who can make things change? Is it the ministers? It's me and you. It's only the sum of different behaviors by each one of us that can make things change. Now, we have a problem with this. Because when we say, okay, we'll personally engage in having a better future for my planet, you feel first, I am just a drop in the ocean. I am insignificant. First thought. Second thought, if I am insignificant, why should I be the first one to face all the problems in becoming more sustainable? Well, there are two mistakes in this reasoning. First, you're not only drops in the ocean. The initiative of an individual can become a tsunami change. I will try to demonstrate it to you that just one choice by one of you can make a huge difference. And second, you still have, but it's difficult, I have to change. Well, the problem is that whatever you do that brings you in tune with nature actually is not a sacrifice. It gives you more money, more well-being, more health, and a whole bunch of other things.
Yes, I'm sorry. They say they don't hear very well. Think it's like a little.
Oh, from
Yes.
okay, right. It becomes stiffer if I see behind this, but it's no problem.
Very well.
So good. It's a challenge for me to convince you that there is no president, there is no United Nations, there is no call that can make the difference. The only ones who can make the difference is you. To go through this, I wouldn't like to have just, me talking and you listening. I will ask you questions, and don't worry, you will not receive grades. It's just to make the thing a little bit more dynamic. But to start understanding this, we have to take it from very far away, from this strange thing, which is balance. There are days in our year in which typically we express good intentions for the future. Our birthday, even more on New Year's Eve. But unless among you there is a Zen Buddhist, I would be surprised if for New Year's Eve, your good intention for the next year is to be in balance. We have other priorities. What we want is to grow, to become better, to develop, to expand, all these dynamic, objectives for the future. And with respect to these goals that we have to improve, the idea of balance seems an obstacle because we perceive balance as a static condition. First question, who has seen Kung Fu Panda? Well, I can say that most people have watched Kung Fu Panda. Do you remember Master Ubue, the little turtle in balance on his little stick? He's so nice, he's so wise. But that's how we perceive balance. And we don't want our lives to be lived in balance on a little stick. We want to explode towards the future and do something. So our instinct is to say that balance is a break to our ambitions, but it is not. Just try to visualize with me the Olympic champion who is going to run 100 meters. When he starts his race, he poses himself at the starting blocks in a condition of perfect balance. That's what he trained for. He trained for this perfect balance at the beginning more than he trained his muscle. but then he explodes forward in his run. And if he didn't have balance, he would just fall on the right or on the left. So balance not only can accompany the dynamic explosion towards the future, like our willingness to improve, to develop, but it must accompany it. Otherwise, you would not achieve any of your goals. This is true for ourselves, but it is also true for the relationship that we have with our planet. Why? Because we live on a tiny layer on top of a tiny, tiny little ball in the universe. We call this layer the biosphere. Except that the surface of the Earth by itself would be a chaotic context. What does it mean? It means that everything interacts with everything in a way that you cannot predict the outcome. It's the so-called butterfly effect. The fluttering of the wings of a butterfly in Tokyo be the first event of a series of events that could grow into a hurricane in Florida. It is important to understand that basically the surface of the Earth is a chaotic butterfly effect context. But if it was only butterfly effect, there would be no life. Because life needs predictable cycles. To have life, you need to rely on the fact that at a certain point there will be spring. Even a unicellular being cannot grow into life if he cannot rely that the pool where he lives is going to remain a pool of water and not become a pool of acid. And for us, it's the same thing. For human organization, it's the same thing. What gives us this predictability, this balance? Planet Earth is a chaotic context, but all this chaos is kind of harnessed by balance, a balance that planet Earth achieved by doing always the same thing, orbiting the same star in the same way. After a while, all this chaos is kind of harnessed in balance, and this gives you the fact that there are predictable cycles that repeat themselves all the time. If we didn't have that, how could we exist as an organized society? For instance, how can you be a farmer if you don't know when it's going to rain? Then you don't know when it's the right time to seed. And this is not only a problem for ancient civilization, for poor rural villages somewhere in Africa. Even the manager of water distribution in New York, if he doesn't know when the Appalachians, which are the mountains close to New York, are covered with snow, he cannot plan water distribution. So we badly need this balance. Otherwise, we cannot exist as an organized society, but we don't think about balance. Why do you think that on New Year's Eve we don't ask for balance, or in general, in everything we do, balance is not in our radar. It's not something that we consider important. Anyone has a clue? Please.
Maybe we destroy the natural balance to our own human balance, which maybe more perfect than
It's one way to interpret it, but basically, in doing so, we did not think about balance. And the reason is economical. It's the same reason by which we are prepared to pay $2,024 for an ounce of gold. But what is the market price of the air that we breathe? How much would you pay 1 ounce of air? What is the market price of air? Nothing, zero. It means, but if they give you the final choice, either you have gold or you have air, you decide air. It means that we don't give value to things, to services, products, according to how useful they are. We give value to them according to a perception of scarcity. So we don't think about balance, even though it is very important, basically because we have flawed it with balance. Personally, with the exception of some people who are less lucky, we are born with a lot of physiological and psychological balance. And in our relationship with nature, nature in the last 10,000 years, after the end of the last ice age, has given us a lot of balance and predictability. Whenever something is abundant, we don't care about it. We only realize how important it is when we miss it. Imagine that at New Year's Eve, I am a young guy who wants to become a better football soccer player. So I make all my training skills. I just don't think about balance until the moment in which suddenly I don't have it anymore. For instance, I break my leg. I don't have my physiological balance anymore. Then I realize how important balance is. Without balance, I cannot become better. I cannot grow. I cannot expand. So, what is climate change? What is environmental degradation? Is not only, caring about a beautiful butterfly with blue wings that we will not see anymore. Fighting for the environment, it means fighting to protect the doses of balance against the doses of chaos. It's fighting for predictability of the cycles of nature. Uh, why climate change causes a problem with predictability and balance? I suppose we've all heard about the causes of climate change. The greenhouse effect, you know it. So what do we do? At a certain point, we started pumping some gases in the atmosphere. These gases let solar radiation in at the frequency that it arrives. And if our planet was in energy balance, it would shoot it back the same amount in space, but in another frequency, infrared. And these gases block infrared. So some energy enters, but does not go out. And so we keep accumulating energy in the system and we're not in balance anymore. Do you know how much energy we accumulate every day? And this calculation was not made by those, utopists and idealists that go around with Greta Thunberg. This calculation was made by NASA, the United States Space Administration. Let us use a measure. In atomic bombs, you know how many atomic bombs we inject in our atmosphere every day? I'll pay a coffee to the person who gets closer to the figure. Climate change is the equivalent of the explosion of how many atomic bombs? 1,000. Okay. Anyone offers more? 20,000. My friends, I wish it was like that. It's the equivalent of the explosion of 400,000 atomic bombs every single day in our atmosphere. Now, planet Earth is big, but it's not so big. The radius of planet Earth, not the radius, the diameter, is 12,000 kilometers, which is Italy 6 times, Germany 4 times and a half. So we're not so big. And if we keep injecting all this energy into our planet, it means that all this energy doesn't know where to go because our planet was imbalanced in another way. So it starts going around. And it makes things violent, but also unpredictable. And in 2023, we started to see, and it's only the beginning, what's happening. Floods, the alternating drought, rain when it was never seen before, suddenly cold in summer and warm in winter. All this, for instance, makes a possibility to grow food very, very difficult. Now, they've put on my screen, but it's okay.
share it, Grammenos.
Okay, so if I can finish,
Yeah, yeah.
I will go through the slides now. So this is the reasoning of naturalists, of people, scientists. Scientists are not always right. They're worried about the future because we are losing balance. But is it really important? Well, you don't need to look at the future. Also, the past shows you that balance with nature is important. That predictability of cycles, of nature cycles, is important. Right now, you are sitting in a very, very lucky place. If I sent out a TV troupe to interview people in the streets, asking what is the most important revolution in history, what would they reply? Yes.
Maybe the, red wheels.
What the wheel? Okay. Another revolution which is considered very important in history.
Virus.
Yeah, but these are inventions. I'm talking about revolutions, like the French Revolution or something like that. What is the most important revolution in history?
Industrial.
The industrial. Yeah, that's probably what we would hear. But people forget that there has been a revolution a long time ago, which was much more important. And it was the agricultural revolution. It's not only the moment in which people started cultivating fields, it was the moment in which mankind switched from a passive user of the ecosystem, hunter-gatherers, we just went out to pick what nature gave us, to managers of the ecosystem. We started managing the territory. And this happened exactly here where you are. It happened around the Mediterranean. It started in Anatolia and the so-called Fertile Crescent, which is today's Iraq, and then it expanded to Southern Europe. It happened here not because there were smarter sapiens around here, but because here there were the perfect conditions. Here we have a big sea. It's big, but it's not an ocean. An ocean can become chaotic, and it acted as a stabilizer. It absorbed excess heat in summer and released it gradually during winter, which not only gave us pleasant temperatures, but also made things very stable, very predictable. And it's only in a place where you really know when it's going to rain that you can have the idea, okay, I will start seeding, I will start organizing the territory. So we were very lucky. Mother Nature gave us balance, but not in the same amount everywhere. Has anyone of you ever traveled to Mexico? Yeah, what? Most people who go to Mexico, they go to a region called Yucatan. Yucatan is famous for its marvelous beaches and Cancun. And after you spend a week doing nothing at the beach, you feel that you should, do something more constructive. So you go and visit some Maya archaeological sites. The most well-known of which is called Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza is a famous city of the Maya pyramids. Even if you have not been there, probably you can visualize them, know the Maya pyramids. So people go to Chichen Itza, they see the pyramids, but they never stop in front of the monument around which the whole of Chichen Itza revolt was built. Chichen Itza was not a real city, it was a ceremonial city, a religious city. Well, also because it doesn't look like a monument. It's just a square of stone with no decorations. On top of the stone, the Mayas used to perform human sacrifices. Actually, what they did was really weird because every year they put to death in a very cruel way the winning team of the football championship. The winning team of Europa League or the equivalent, instead of receiving a lot of money and Ferraris, they were put to death, sacrificed. If we ask ourselves, what were the Mayans demanding to the gods? To come to the point of, I don't know, crucifying Cristiano Ronaldo? With modern words, we have to imply that they were asking for balance. They wanted the gods to grant them that rain would arrive at the predicted time. Now, Asking fertility to the gods exists in every civilization. Even now in modern times, I don't know how it is in Germany, but in Italy, you still have, religious ceremonies close by the fields at the time of the harvest. But there's a big difference between a religious ceremony and, I don't know, burning Messi alive. Why? Because we Europeans are good and the Mayas were wicked? I don't think so. Throughout history, Europeans have been very, very wicked. It's just because, there they had the notion that of scarcity. Balance was scarce. Here in the Mediterranean, it was very abundant. We had the Mediterranean stabilizing things. But Mexico lies in the middle of a fluctuation you have heard about, is the one that opposes El Nino to La Nina. So if you're in a place where suddenly climate can switch to another modality, it becomes so important for you that to have rain at the predicted time, otherwise you will not eat, that you make human sacrifices. The Mayas developed a fantastic astronomical science, but was not like us. They didn't do it because they wanted to know the secrets of the cosmos. They did it because they needed calendars. And these calendars were not to predict the end of the world. They were just to know when should I see it, this kind of thing. So, but besides anecdotes, did I manage to convince you that balance is important, even though we don't think about balance? You can also say that, no, it's just, yeah, okay. Since you don't reply, take it for granted that I managed. And if you do consider that balance is important, we have to understand it a little bit. There are many things that could be said about balance, but for our purposes today, there is just one thing that needs to be understood. This balance that we are defending, if you fight for the environment, you're fighting for balance. But this balance is global. And here is why it is so important to have class exchanges or AFS programs or this kind of things. We need to understand each other. Geographically global, what does it mean? It means that you cannot have the illusion to preserve balance, wealth there where you have from chaos outside. Maybe by building a wall around, because there are still butterfly effects. So the fluttering of the wings of a butterfly in Tokyo, blah, 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 hurricane. But the hunger of a kid in Ethiopia could be the first event of a series of events that brings someone to put a bomb on the plane where traveling. We are all interconnected and still. And this is kind of obvious. People tend to express this concept by defining themselves local. I act locally, but I think globally. But this is a big illusion. There is something inside ourselves that obliges us to think only locally, and we don't even realize it. It's just an instinct. In 2009, two social psychologists in an American university, it was Utah University, ran an interesting experiment with their students. They divided them into groups, and each group underwent, we say, the same procedure with one variation. First group, they were told that they lived in a city 100 kilometers away from a nuclear plant that exploded. And then these guys were exposed to films and photos of the aftermath of the explosion, the nuclear fallout. Second group, exactly the same thing, same photos, same films, but there was a small variation in the story. They were told not that they lived 100 kilometers away, but 20 kilometers away, except that this nuclear plant was located after the boundary. It did not belong to the same country. And then they measured the levels of anxiety of the two groups to discover that those who were told that the nuclear plant exploded in their mouths, but it was across the boundary, expressed a level of anxiety notably lower than the other group. And this brings us to two possible conclusions. Conclusion number one, Utah University teaches to idiots. But this is unlikely because these people were PhDs in psychology. Second possible conclusion is that even a PhD, that is someone who has studied, who has cultivated, even volunteers with Greenpeace or with Fridays for Future, unconsciously, they're prisoner of an instinct, which is called border bias, that obliges you to think that only things that happen in my community are important. It's the remnant of a period in which only things that happen in my tribe were important because we couldn't visualize the rest. It's still there. The tribe has changed name. Now we call it state or whatever you want, but we're still there. So we think that our neighboring couple who is fighting and raised plates is more important for us than a child dying in Ethiopia. And this is something that which is very strong. And we will see how this plays in our choices. But not only we have to understand that this balance that we defend is not German, Italian, Ethiopian, it's global. We also have to understand that this balance puts together not only every place, but also every sector. All sectors are related. So we have a balance that we have to defend. That is the result of the balance in many local and sectorial sub-balances. And if you agree with me that caring about balance is important, we have to find a way to put all this under rational control. And we found a way. We decided to use a mathematical instrument like its music. I think that at your age, you have already met a matrix. You all know what is a matrix? Okay, but to understand this matrix of the earth, what is the first thing? Forget that you're cultivated people that you've studied. Just want the first image that comes into your mind. What is the first image that comes into your mind if I say French Revolution? Guillotine, fantastic. Beheadings. So, no textbook, neither in high schools nor in university, tell a story. That is that 4 years before the French Revolution, a very strong eruption started in Iceland, in the Lucky System. This eruption filled the sky with ashes, particulate. Ashes blocked sunlight, and this determined 4 very cold years, which in turn determined an important reduction in agricultural production. So when you read that the French arrived to the Bastille, animated by the ideals of Illuminism, maybe a couple of them, but the rest were just hungry. They're right there because they were hungry. So we live in a system in which volcanoes interact with guillotines. How do we put this under control? We can build a matrix. What is a matrix? A matrix is a table. There are boxes. In each box, there is a number. And so far, we just have a list of numbers. It becomes a matrix when every box is connected to the others through an algorithm, a function that tells you how the value in one case, one box changes according to the value in another box. So we can imagine Earth matrices as various levels of complexity. For instance, I can imagine a matrix that has a case, a box for the Pinatubo volcano in Asia that erupts, connected with a case that concerns agricultural productivity in Asia that goes down because of the eruption, connected with a box that relates to Wall Street trends that suffer from it and they go down, connected to a box that portrays my own T. Josephine, who had invested everything in Wall Street, loses everything and commits suicide. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough calculation power to use a matrix so complicated. So we have to use a much simpler matrix, which is the one that I'm showing you on the slide. It doesn't have the shape of a matrix, but this is a 4-cases matrix that interconnects dynamically 4 macro sectors: environment, development, human rights, and peace. How does it work? Let us imagine an environmental event that is a drought. From the point of view of human beings, it doesn't stay just an environmental event. Very often it transforms into an economic event. It concerns development because with drought, there is a failed harvest. Now, if this happens in a rich place where farmers are protected, for instance, they ensure their harvest, or if they don't, the state intervenes and gives them some money, the chain of consequences stops there. But if this happens in a poor place where you have no protection, let's say in the Sahel, do you know where is the Sahel? Is the African band between the Sahara and the tropical forest. An economic event determined by an environmental event can transform into an event that concerns human rights. For instance, when the failed harvest makes the difference between sending or not sending your children to school. But take an individual or a family, submit them to uncertainty about their subsistence, the possibility to eat, compress their fundamental rights, and you have the recipe of war. Why? Because when you're a father and you cannot rely anymore on your farm, you look around and you look for a solution. And very often there is, most of the time, there is a specific industrial sector that comes to rescue before anyone else. The quickest industrial sector that comes to rescue desperate people is who are the ones who rescue desperate people before anyone else? Any idea? What comes into your mind? The Red Cross, the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, in a certain way, the army. But no, actually, the first one who comes to rescue if you're desperate is the criminals. Yeah. I've lost everything. I look around, and probably the first one who comes to offer me a way out tells me, listen, I'll give you some money, but can you please swallow some nodules with cocaine and bring them across the frontier? And this is the private side of it. But then there is also the public side. Let us place ourselves in the Sahel. The Sahel is this band where there is desertification, where the traditional water art, which is Lake Chad, shrinked 18 times in 40 years. From a huge lake, it became like a pool. So people don't have security about the food anymore. They look around and they discover that there is an employer that gives very high salaries. $500 per month, which is in the Sahel, is huge. People actually knew that this employer would give $500 in salaries, but even so, they wouldn't go to work with this employer because they think that the lifestyle that this employer proposes isn't worth $500. But if you don't have an alternative, you still have to eat, you go and work with them. And this employer is called Boko Haram, which is a terrible terrorist formation. So this is what is happening now. We have entered into a situation in which we have a huge feedback loop. Somewhere we made a mistake. We injected something destructive in our system, and this destructiveness propagates to all the sectors. That environment transforms in that economy, which transforms in less protected human rights, which transforms into conflicts and migration, which in turn make the environment even worse. And this is where we are now. It's accelerating. Everything is destabilized. And actually, this terrible feedback loop is composed of two feedback loops that interact and amplify each one. Well, the first kind of feedback loop, it's an ecosystem feedback loop or REST. We have entered into a situation in which the fact that a certain part of the environment doesn't work makes another part of the environment not work, which in turn makes the first part not work even more. And I'll give you, we have discovered 15 cycles like that. We don't have time to go through them, but I'll give you just an example. You see this crater? It's in Siberia, and it's a crater of a new kind. There weren't craters like this before. So there was an attempt to explain them. Some people say it's the UFOs, but most scientists tell us that these craters are caused by the explosion of methane. You know what is methane? It's the gas with which we cook if you don't have electric induction. Why? Because we started heating and with having a higher temperature, we also started to have the thaw of permafrost. Who knows what is permafrost?
Layer wise, really,
Thank you.
This is the permafrost is in the like the layer wise, usually be permanent on the ones.
It's not too much, but no. Actually, who cares about permafrost? It's not part of our lives, but permafrost covers 20% of the Earth's planet. And it's a marine version, which is called the clathrates to the same. Permafrost is not ice, it's frozen soils that have been frozen for centuries until since the end of the last ice age, in some cases even a lot more. And there is a lot of permafrost. In some areas, permafrost is 500 meters deep. Now, frozen soil. Soil is not only minerals, there is a lot of organic matter that plants, that animals, fungi, mushrooms, bacteria. It's all that stuff that if you keep it underground enough time becomes oil or coal. So if you defreeze organic matter, you may have heard that organic chemistry is the chemistry of carbon. Part of it goes into the atmosphere. You've probably already forgotten a steak out of the fridge. After a while, it starts stinking. It's the same thing. It's something that goes into the air. So this is all carbon chemistry that gets into the atmosphere. It gets into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, which is the principal culprit of climate change, but also in the form of methane, the gas that we use to cook. Except that methane has one difference. Its power to trap heat, to produce a greenhouse effect, is up to 60 times stronger than carbon dioxide. So we started to heat. By heating, permafrost is thawing, so it's releasing methane and carbon dioxide. So heat goes up, so more permafrost is melting. So, what is the power of this cycle? Again, I don't want to be autobiographical or to refer to my own life, but I was one of the negotiators of the so-called Paris Agreement, one that should save us. And it's a political agreement because I belong to the group of the most stupid negotiators, which were the political negotiators, and we prevailed with this very complicated 42 pages agreement. We prevailed on another small group of negotiators, which were the scientists. The scientists wanted an agreement which was just one line. We agreed to subtract from predicted emissions 18 gigatons equivalent of carbon dioxide. Well, again, it's not those crazy idealists of Fridays for Future, but it's NOAA, which is the United States agency that takes care of atmosphere and the sea, that has calculated that the permafrost cycle alone, and there are 15 cycles like that, goes quick. Before the end of the century, it will release in the atmosphere not 18, but 90 gigatons equivalent of carbon dioxide, which means that we will have an average increase of temperature by 3.5 degrees and an average increase of temperature over the Arctic of 8 degrees. These scenarios are not compatible with human civilization. We cannot survive in there. We will have to start fighting for bread, water, and things like that. So there is this one cycle, which is terrible, but it interacts with another cycle, which is a little bit more terrible. And I'm sorry if I make a reference to Germany, but it's just for you to, there are no implications. It's just for people to understand. At school, we have now learned that the causes of the Second World War was not the personal lunacy of Hitler or Mussolini. It's not because these people were crazy that there was the Second World War. The reason why there was the Second World War is that people were suffering a severe socio-economic stress. In Italy, we had the recovery from the war. In Germany, we had the 1929 crisis plus the reparations of the Versailles Treaty. This made people miserable. And it's only in these conditions that populations are induced into making aggressive choices. Now, take this idea and transfer it, I will come to the next slide at the end, to this context. This is the northern part of Africa. It's mainly composed of deserts. Deserts are not a generous ecosystem, but still there are some populations that found a way to survive in the desert, except that today we don't only have deserts. We also have the Sahel, which is the area of uncertainty. It is desertifying, but it's not desertifying because there is less water. It is desertifying because the same amount of water is coming in a shorter period, so it's more violent, and above all, because you don't know when it falls. 3 years ago, I was in Mali, and farmers were in panic, not because there was no water, but because it rained before the forecasted time, and this ruined their investments in seeds. So you see where this area of uncertainty is, and you might notice that it coincides with the area of concentration of hunger and conflicts, of terrorist dynamics. I don't know what to do to give some food to my children, so I look around and I go with Boko Haram or Al Shabaab or whatever you want. Illegal trafficking of all sorts. And look where 9 out of 10 of those that we call migrants, which are not migrants because they are forced population movements, come from. This is what happens when we are not in balance with our planet. It's happening faster there because they are poorer, but it will happen to us too if we continue this way. So we have this nature to nature cycle that will accelerate all the disruption of nature that interacts with this cycle, which is even worse. Environmental stress falls, first of all, on the poor, but the poor cannot really face it. So they enter into a state of emergency and they collapse into conflict and disorder. But this means also that they're not able to take care of their environment. So two things happen. The cycle restarts amplifying in their territories, but it's not only them, it's us also. Remember when we talked about what our scientists at Utah University found? We're not here to think that something that happens far away is important for us. So we hear poor people in the Sahel, they are so poor, and now also climate change is impacting them even worse. So what will I do? I will send them a few bags of rice, and I'm okay. It's basically their business. Me, I'm fine. I'm rich. But what happens? If you leave these poor people to themselves, not only you will have chains of consequences of terrorism and this kind of things, but also they will not be able to participate in the race, the global race, to keep climate change under control. They can't. They are into emergency. They don't care about tomorrow. But if they don't participate quantitatively, it is impossible to stay below the threshold of catastrophe. So if you leave poor people alone on their own, you're actually suiciding because you need them to be stable to have a stable world. So the first thing that is striking, I've been working with environment 30 years. And whenever I observe a planet that tells me the poor first, it's the planet. It's not Buddha, Jesus, or whoever. It's the planet that tells the poor first. And if you don't take care of the poor first, you're not immoral. You're an idiot. You're suicidal. I'm strict. But so This is what's happening now, but worse things can happen in the future. Showing you the glaciers of Himalaya, Hindu Kush, and Pavilion. Because of climate change, at a certain point they will collapse. They will not keep melting gradually with increase of temperature. Beyond a certain temperature, I don't have time to explain why. Believe me, they will collapse. And if I tell this in Brescia, in London, where I'm looking for some funds, people look at me with an empathic reaction. Oh, what a pity, poor people there. We will lose the beauty of the alpine landscape, which are all very important things. But basically, we are prisoners of border bias, the Utah University thing, we don't give a damn. It's so far away. It's none of my business. And then we forget, for instance, that the Roman Empire crumbled not only because of internal problems, but also due to the arrival of some populations which were generically called the barbarians, but at the origin were movements of Central Asian populations determined by climate fluctuations, frankly, ridiculous compared to what we're going to see now. So what happens is the glaciers suddenly vanish. When you lose the case of the matrix, you don't only lose its beauty, the beauty of the landscape, you also lose the function it performs to protect the rest of the balance. If you lose bees, you don't want to lose the beauty of the yellow and black circles. You lose impollination. And if you lose the glaciers, you lose their functions. Many functions. One of them is really essential for us, is that they are the regulators of an orderly outflow of water towards the plains. To the south of the Himalaya, there is a monsonic climate. You know what is a monsonic climate? It means that here you have a very rainy season, very, very heavy rain, that alternates with a very dry season, no rain at all. So what do the glaciers do? They store the excess of humidity of the rainy season and they release it gradually during the dry season through a network of rivers that irrigate plains where 1.4 billion people live. If the glaciers collapse, suddenly these people will have to manage an unmanageable alternance of drought and floods. Now, again, let's go back to our example. German middle class, we are talking about people who used to gather in family to play together Brahms quartets, not the heirs of Bach, you know, stressed by the loss of value of their savings and loss of jobs, were induced into the choices that contributed to the Second World War. Here we have Italians, the same thing. Here we have not 20, 450, 500 million people who lose water, rice, roads, this kind of things. Add to this beautiful mix the fact that in this area, 4 states, India, China, Russia, and Pakistan, have nuclear bombs, and Houston, we have a problem. But my job is not Nostradamus. I've not come here to announce you that the end of the world is close, so it's better if you quit school and you start drinking. That's not the point. The difference is that now we know how it works and we can do something. We can do something about it, but do what? Wait for the United Nations to have another treaty? Wait for the ministers to sign another law? They're just pieces of paper. We have to do something because our future is at stake. And this is not going to happen in the next century. This is going to happen in 15 years. Just at the beginning of your professional life, we're going into this scenario. Who has to do something? Useless for the ministers or for all those people. It's you. And what can I do? I need to sacrifice for the environment, maybe, or maybe not. Sorry, this is just, let's go to, I only have this one in Italian, but it's okay. Do what? I'm showing you 2 pyramids. The first one is very well known, although it's in Italian, I think you understand what it is. It's called the nutrition pyramid. It tells you how you should eat to be in good health. a little bit of red meat, a little more proteins from other animals, but above all, a diet that preserves your health and well-being is made of fibers, vegetables, and this kind of things. Now it happens that if you couple this pyramid to the pyramid that describes the impact on nature of the production of each kind of food, you discover that the more a certain kind of food harms my health if eaten in excess, I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, if eaten in excess, the more its production harms the environment. Strange. So what a coincidence in the nutrition field, except that it's not a coincidence. And it works in every field. Think about your transportation choices. As long as you're allowed to reach, transportation depends also on things that you cannot choose, how far you are from a job, and things like that. As long as you choose transportation that leaves you with more money in your pocket, better physical shape, better human readings, better socialization, the more it's sustainable. Think about the showers that you take. Is it a coincidence that the only shower that really does not destroy your immune system, which is short, not too hot, and you use chemical products in a very reduced way, is also the most sustainable? Is this a miracle? You don't need the gods to explain it. You can explain it with science. It's very simple. It's the result of co-evolution. We evolved together with the rest. So we were shaped to be well if we are in tune with the rest. Another example, a hot day. We city people, when there is a hot day, we want refreshment, and our instinct is to go and look for it at the mall, at the shopping center, because there is air conditioning. And indeed, you get refreshment, but you get it with some shock. You start sneezing, the air is dry. Instead, if the same hot day you place yourself below, you don't need a forest, 2 trees, suddenly you have exactly the temperature, the humidity, the sound that makes you feel well. Why? Because we have evolved with trees during millions and millions of years. We have evolved with shopping centers only during 20 years. So we are not made for shopping center. We are naturally made for nature. We are not made for cars. We are naturally made for walking, biking, and things like that. So whenever we really protect our well-being, by definition, we are sustainable. Nature is made so that when we are in well-being, we protect nature. We can translate this relationship as what's good for you is good for your planet, what's good for your planet is good for you. So this seems like an individual invitation to stop fearing making sustainable choices. No sacrifice, more money, more health, more well-being. But let us try to make this thing a little bit more, how would I say, uh, more strategic, more power. Let us imagine that the rich world that can afford the choice suddenly decides to eat in a healthy way. Not because of climate, the future, and simply because it's better to be healthy, that's it. There would start to be some advantages. First, individual advantages. A lot more money in your pockets, because if you're healthy, you don't go to the doctor, you go less to the pharmacy, and not only you perform better. OCD, I will not explain what is OCD, look it up, but normally they say serious things, states that if you have a good nutrition, you have 30% more chances to be successful in your studies and your work life. But what if more people do that? Suddenly you will have a huge decrease in your taxes. Why? Because we call ourselves the rational species, but I still have a big question mark. People are very much afraid. I hope that people can see me if I stand up. I feel so much professor. I'm not a professor. Though you call me professor. No. We call ourselves the rational species. So much afraid of the 9.5 billion people. You know that right now we produce enough calories to feed 12 billion people, except that we produce and distribute them in a very strange way. We produce, on one hand, 2 billion people who are sick because they eat too much. And these 2 billion people cost us a lot of money. Only the expenses of public health services for obesity are the equivalent of the GDP of the seventh wealthiest nation. Obesity in productivity is the equivalent of 70 million people missing in jobs every year. So we don't have obesity, our taxes decrease a lot. But in front of all these people who are sick because they eat too much, there are roughly 900 million people who don't eat. They are poor. They are in food scarcity, food insecurity. And these people cost us even more money. Even if we don't care about them because we are rich, actually they are the ones that start all those chains of situations that oblige you to pay Frontex, armies, development cooperation, and all these things. So just by respecting our natural nutrition, we would be probably decreasing our taxes by half while we protect the environment. But what does it mean to eat healthy? It doesn't mean giving up something which is good for you, which gives you pleasure. It means give up the excess which is harmful for you. And we do not become sustainable because there is less consumption. We become sustainable in a very strange way. And I ask you to follow me on this. It's a little bit complicated, but it's fundamental. We don't become sustainable because we, the rich, consume less. We become sustainable because this excess that harms me, if I don't use it, it becomes available to those who need it. The consumed quantity is the same, but it's distributed in a more just way. So what do we have to do? We'll have to organize an air bridge to transport all those steaks that we don't eat to Somalia? No need. The ecosystem and the economic system do this job. What is your power of drops in the ocean? Imagine that you decide to drop out that market that boasts selling 1 million hamburger per minute. What do? You do this. Your single individual choice falls on so many sectors that it becomes a huge choice. You don't eat that hamburger, your health is better, but then you don't fuel the system that puts together 70 billion poor animals in intensive cattle raising, where they had a terrible life. So you become more humane with animals. But also, all these animals packed together, they produce ammonia pools that transform into particulate that causes lung cancer. And to have this kind of all this quantity of food, production must be concentrated. So you have to transport it. And when you transport it, you have particulate that causes you illnesses, more. Okay. I could go on for a whole day telling you the list of things that will become better in a very tiny quantity, but your own tiny choice is transferred to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sectors. But above all, what happens is that if you want to eat all that crappy meat, these cows have to be fed, and you cannot bring them around happily like Heidi's cow. You need to keep them all packed together where they can become a sanity bomb, because altogether they have to be pumped with antibiotics, so they will develop antibiotic resistance, out of which something will come out that will make COVID seem ridiculous. But above all, you have to feed them, and you have to feed them with fodder. They cannot go out in the fields. But the rich people don't have enough space around them to feed these animals, so they have to go and buy space somewhere else. What do? We burn the Amazonian forest to grow soy or corn. So when we say that Bolsonaro is very bad because he burns Amazonia, look at the truth. It's not Bolsonaro. There is not one president in the world that can resist what we call the market. The one who is burning Amazonia is you, me. Whenever we eat that crappy meat, which is animal suffering, makes you unhealthy, things like that. And to grow all this food, we have to buy lands from poor populations that are obliged to sell you all their lands for a very tiny price. And we take also the water. So something that makes you sick is making other people poor. If we decide to respect our health, automatically you free them, you give them nutrition sovereignty, food security, and you don't have to pay Frontex, the armies, development cooperation, and all this. So at a certain point, we talked about mathematics. We decided to put this big balance under control through a matrix, which is a mathematical instrument. A mathematical instrument is normally solved by the equation. And here is the equation of Mother Earth, in which can be very powerful agents. My own well-being transforms in sustainability. Sustainability transforms automatically into justice because it means that I give up what is bad for me and it becomes available to those who need it. But remember what we said about the causes of the Second World War? If we build justice, then we will achieve the one thing that we never managed to reach in our history, which is peace. We live in a planet that tells you, if you respect yourself, I will flood you with abundance, well-being, and peace. I could stop here, but tell me if I have 3 or 4 more minutes to get a little bit deeper in this. Okay. If I had another presentation, I would show you an economic curve, which is called the law of marginal utility. I suppose that you have not met this in your study so far. Okay? Law of marginal utility is a curve. Now I will say it in complicated terms and will explain. What does this law say? It says that the utility brought by any supplementary unit of a certain good is decreasing up to the point where it becomes negative, incomprehensible. Let me explain it. Imagine I am a starving person. I'm going to die because I don't have food. A generous guy comes and offers me one bread. This first bread has a huge utility for me. It saves my life. Then he gives me a second bread, which is still very useful because I can think about tomorrow, but a little bit less than the first one. Then he gives me a third piece of bread, which is still very useful, but a little less than the second one. And you agree with that? But if this guy goes this way, and after 2 days, he discharges a truckload of bread every 5 minutes in front of my house, every supplementary unit of bread, instead of being something that helps me, becomes a problem. So we live into a strange economics. The economics tells you that the rational actor of economy is the one who always tries to maximize his profit. At the same time, economics tells you that if you maximize too much, you're an idiot. Now, the whole natural world consumes according to the law of marginal utility. That is, if you have a lioness in front of 4,000 gazelles, she doesn't kill them all. She just kills the one that is useful for her family. And the economists reply, yeah, but lions do not stock and do not invest. Well, but I know species who stock and invest even better than us. Take ants. Ants, if they wanted, they could stock the planet in 1 afternoon. But if you go into their houses, tunnels and things like that, you don't find one single grain above what they need. So ants know that if they have more grains which are not useful, they just have the problem of taking care of those grains, and those grains will give them nothing. And they also know that if there are too many grains above what they need, The other tribe of Huns will certainly come to them and make war because they have been deprived of what belongs to them. Now, also human beings consume according to the marginal utility curve, provided that the expressed finality of a certain good coincides with the real finality of a certain good. Let me explain. Washing powder. I don't know people who keep hyperaccumulate washing powder because the express finality of washing powder is washing, and the real finality of washing powder is washing. We become completely crazy when these two, the declared finality and the real finality, diverge. For instance, declared finality, cover me or make phone calls. Real finality, how cool I am. Look at the last smartphone. When this happens, we become crazy because we enter into a market and we are not aware of that. We are not trying to buy cloaks or telephone capacities. We're trying to buy status. And when you try to buy status, you never achieve your goal. I lived my whole life in the dream of finally having my 60 meters yacht. I have it and I'm happy until the 62 meters yacht is not anchored beside my own. So it's like that. This is one point. The other point is that actually all these things do not buy you status. Let us be sincere. In your age, many people rely on exhibiting objects to have a status in the group. What do you really think about? What do you really think? So if I quote a brand, which I shouldn't, what do you really think about your guy? It happens in Italy who arrives posting his 600 euro socks by Gucci. But what do you think of that guy who is always there showing that he has the last smartphone? Basically, you might have some admiration for the moment. You might accept him as a friend out of friendship, but you basically think he is an idiot. So you have people investing all the money that could be used for better things into what? Into having cupboards in your house filled with crap that you never use, and you have to take care of it whenever there is a change of season. It's more complicated than the logistics of Carrefour or Lidl. So what are we doing? If we observe nature, nature that tells us the poor first, then a nature that tells us the only thing you need is to respect your well-being. If you really look at your well-being, I will function well. And then nature tells us one last thing is I function perfectly well, provided you comply with the one thing that makes you human, special, which is not intelligence, we're stupid. It is freedom. If you become free from the slavery of objects to be someone, you don't need to have something to be something because you are something. You are the person you are, and you don't need to boast your damn phone. And to become an idiot that spends endlessly rushing after every time that they change the last model of smartphone, also called fashion or fast fashion, then I'll give you a very good news. If you do that, I will be fired from my job because you don't need any more diplomats, you don't need any more soldiers, you don't need any more COP and treaties. It's enough. If you are free, nature will flood you with generosity, well-being, and peace. Thank you very much.
I think it's amazing what you said, amazing, and we will make a lot of lessons about your conference, Grammenos. Don't you think so? The teachers who are here, teaches biology or English, or a simple citizen, will really care about our planet in a different way after your stay. And I think it's time for a little break. Less than a quarter, as I previously wrote in the program. I would say 10 minutes, okay? So now is 10:30 to, yes, 20 to 11. We will be here again for the dissemination abilities. Thank you.